Hi, and welcome to Camera Music. I'm Steve Wagaman, producer of Camera Music and president of the Chamber Music Society of Detroit. It's an incredible pleasure to welcome you here to Michael Brown's apartment in the Washington Heights area of Manhattan. Behind me is the glorious Concert Grand Steinway, and actually behind that is another glorious Concert Grand Steinway. And we've just finished recording a beautiful, beautiful recital that you'll hear in a bit. And so, Michael, welcome to Camera Music.
Hi, Steve. Welcome to my apartment. I can't believe you're here. I mean, this is amazing.
Well, you'll see some shots. Actually, you see a bunch of paraphernalia around us. We filmed this with 6 cameras and 3 pairs of stereo microphones. I guess 1 stereo microphone and 2 stereo pairs of other migrophones. 3 stereo pairs.
Yeah.
We ended up having 8 inputs. It was a pretty elaborate configuration, but I think we got a nice mix. You'll enjoy the sound very much, and lots of shots of your hands in motion. But it was a beautifully conceived program, and so I want to get into that music with you in a bit. But first, why on earth do you have 2 Concert Grand Steinways in your apartment?
Well, thank you. That's a good question. It didn't happen overnight. It's this one, which you'll hear the concert on. This is her name is Octavia. She was born in 1893.
Fantastic.
And she's, I think, very special piano that I bought 5 or so years ago, had rebuilt, and it's my piano for life, and it's very special. And behind her is a piano named Daria, who is sort of, I'm holding for a friend, sort of friend of a friend. And that's a bit of a long story. I mean, I can tell you the whole story of how it happened, how they got moved in here, but at the bare bones is that I've got 2 for now, but yeah.
Well, and of course, we had about a year ago, we had a wonderful recital with you and Arno Sussman, and I guess you were playing.
At that time, the pianos were reversed.
I see.
There's been a little switch that happened, because this piano actually left my apartment to go do a recording shoot somewhere else, and then came back. And this is what the pandemic has done. It's made things kind of shift around, and things a little bit strange. I mean, the fact that you drove from Detroit with your equipment and met me is so
right.
great.
And in full disclosure, this thing got planned in a matter of 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Something crazy like that. We ended up deciding with the COVID spikes in Michigan that we would postpone a live concert and replace it with this webcast concert. And the live concert that was postponed will happen later. And if you were expecting to see that on Camera Music, you will. It just won't happen until May in one case and September in another. But it's a beautiful setup you have here, and there's not much space for anything else here. But
no, but it was fun to watch you crawl under the pianos a bunch of times to set up that camera, and just we had to be very economical with our with our space here. But to me honestly, just to see what you did with the cameras and the microphones in my own apartment is a bit of a dream. That kind of a setup. It's very cool.
It's been a labor of love since we started it, and I know you were actually at least 2 of the microphones we used for your recital are yours, and then we everything else was sort of supplemented from our inventory, which has been growing ever since we started this process. And so you actually just pivoted back to doing in-person concerts not too long ago. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, I mean, since the summer of 2021, I've done a lot of in-person concerts. It's been almost semi-normal until maybe this month, when things kind of, hopefully temporarily, got a little derailed. But it seems to me that there is still a lot of stuff planned coming up, and trips and concerts, and I hope it all happens and we can...
Yeah.
It involves people getting together in a room, but I'm,
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah. Well, and you're an incredibly busy guy. You've been at this full time for a decade or more, and one of the more active, I can't say young pianist anymore, but you're not old either.
It's awkward, right? So it's an awkward age. I'm not
Right.
young, I'm not really old, maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
sort of an in-between person.
Right. Well, and young enough that you still have many, many years ahead of you, and old enough to have experienced enough of life to really have something to say in your music. I think that's a true statement. Well, let's look at the music.
Yeah.
You've pulled a couple of things together that I had never heard of, and shame on me. I've studied piano, and tell us about the first composer on this program.
Well, I think you'd not be alone in never hearing about her. Her name is Delphine Von Chalrot, and she was a student kind of on and off of Felix Mendelssohn.
Okay.
And she came to play for him when she was 11. She was apparently very precocious with a dazzling light technique, people said about her.
Which Mendelssohn loved.
He loved that. He had it himself. And he was really taken with her playing. And then she came and played for him again when she was 16, and she still had the great technique, but she also had, at the age of 16, she developed into her sort of beauty, and Mendelssohn was very taken with her and started courting her mother.
And by beauty, you're not talking musical.
Probably both. Mendelssohn was taken by the whole picture,
the whole package,
the whole personality, the whole picture. Started courting her mother. There was sort of rumors of maybe an engagement. And basically, Mendelssohn had left town, had come back, and she had married someone else, and he was heartbroken. But before that happened, she had written him a set of songs without words, which Mendelssohn was famous for writing.
Yes.
And he basically recomposed the Rondo Capriccioso. It was two movements. There's an introduction and a rondo that he kind of did a little surgery on and presented that to her.
I see.
And that's the piece as we know it, Rondo Capriccioso today.
Right.
And he also dedicated the G minor piano concerto to her.
Right.
So she sort of was a fixture.
A muse of sorts.
A muse in his life. And that, to me, is such honestly, a relatable story of that these pieces don't happen in a vacuum. There is often a story, a mood, a feeling behind them. And I find there's so much love in these two pieces, from her to him and from him to her. With the songs without words and the Rondo Capriccioso. So that's how I start the concert, with three of them.
Yes.
Of the Delphine Von Chalrot, and I go right into the Mendelssohn Rondo Capriccioso, which is one of my favorite pieces.
And when I was working on my doctorate at Indiana, they had this thing called the Styles exam, where they would play something and then you'd have to describe what you thought it could be and why. And if I heard those three songs without words by Delphine, I would have answered Mendelssohn. they sound just like Mendelssohn's Song Without Words. They're beautiful, beautiful pieces.
Yeah.
And speaking of studying, you studied at Juilliard.
Yeah.
And one of your principal teachers was Jerome Lowenthal. Any of you who know Jerome Lowenthal's playing, Mendelssohn is like right in the sweet spot, and it's true of you as well.
Thank you.
Those amazing fingers.
Well, I find something about this music of that time. It's just so extremely personal. I think that's the kind of through line of the pieces I put together on this program. There's something very intimate, almost like designed to be played in the living room. That's why it feels like this is the right fit.
Right.
You being in my living room, this type of salon type program.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then the next set on the program, if you will, is the 5 pieces of Ravel's Miroir. Maybe the strangest assortment of short pieces in the history of music, but amazing pieces, and one of them at least quite famous. But tell us about those.
Yeah, like you said, there is a strangeness for it. Even Ravel's contemporaries in 1905 thought, even for his output, it was sort of verging in a more forward-looking, eccentric direction. He wrote each movement for his friends, this sort of group of friends that he would hang out with that night. They would get into trouble, and they would hang out, and they'd read poetry, and he was surrounded by painters and writers and musicians. And each movement is very evocative. I think they have distinct titles. The first movement is called Noctual, which means night moths.
Right.
And the dedicatee of the first piece was a poet named Léon Paul Fargue, and he said which inspired the piece. He wrote this quote, which actually inspired Ravel. I'm going to read it. "In the shed, the night moths take off in awkward flight and circle around other beams." And I think it's a quote that inspired Ravel, and I think it's so perfect, this idea of these night moths taking off in awkward flight. And the whole piece kind of scampers around the piano in awkward flight. And I think that it's so evocative. The second movement is called Wazo Triste, Sad Birds. Mm-hmm. And Ravel said that you could imagine it's the hottest hours of the summer, the birds in the torpor of the hottest hours of the summer. Right. There's a very sort of...
too hot to move.
Exactly. Feeling in this piece.
Yeah.
And the third and fourth pieces are the largest of the set.
Right.
There's the Barque sur l'Océan, the boat in the ocean, is essentially a very, very scintillating, almost Franz Liszt inspired, beautiful canvas for solo piano. Could stand alone on its own as a piece, right. As does the fourth piece, like you said, the most famous, the Alborada del Gracioso, which is Spanish inspired. And it's always so interesting when I perform this piece because that movement has such a big ending and people think that's the end of the piece. Mm-hmm. But after that, there's almost this postlude. It's called the La Vallée des Cloches, the Valley of Bells. And it explores this sort of subterranean, sotto voce, mystical, hushed world. Right. It's so unbelievably sparse, yet magical and nocturnal. And I love playing it on my piano Octavia because you can really explore the overtones and the sounds and the soft dynamics.
And there's something really quite special about this piano. The strings, the voicing, the part of the string that speaks runs from a point close to the pins back to a bridge, and normally on the bridge, the three pins are set in a row so that the length of every one of the strings has every one of the notes has three strings, at least in the top part of the piano.
Right.
And it's normally strung in a way that the length of those three strings, the speaking length, is exactly the same, but not on this one.
Yeah.
They're at an angle, and so there's a slightly different overtone with each of the strings within the unison.
Right.
And it produces this amazing, you'll hear it, it's this amazing subtlety in the sound.
Yeah.
And listen for that in this last movement of the Ravel, because I think you'll hear it, how incredibly nuanced even a single tone can be. This is a really special instrument.
I'm glad you like it.
Yeah.
Would you like it? You can come back anytime, Steve. I want to say that, as a pianist, as you know, we spend so much time at home, mm-hmm. especially during the pandemic. It's been even more time at home. We get to know our own instruments inside and out, and we don't get to perform on them.
Right.
We're at the mercy of showing up in a city, playing adjusting within an hour, if you're lucky, to whatever piano you have. Sometimes you get lucky and you love it and you respond right away, and sometimes it doesn't work out that well.
Right.
But what's so cool about this, you coming here with the equipment, is that I get to play a piano that I play on every day and explore every day. So for me, it's really thrilling to share it with you guys.
Wow. And then you finish the program proper.
Yes.
With a wonderful, one of my favorite chestnuts from Chopin, the Barcarolle, which of course harkens back to the middle movement of the Miroir. It's a beautifully constructed program. So you've had this Barcarolle for a long time.
It's a piece I learned in high school. It sort of was a childhood piece. I was really drawn to it.
Quite a childhood, I should say. Oh. It's not an easy piece.
Not an easy piece, and it's not a piece that I ever grow tired of either. I mean, it's a piece that constantly feels like I'm discovering new things about it. Actually, all of these pieces on the program, I feel like they're so rich, full of discoveries, And Chopin was sort of towards the end of his life.
Very
this
late, yeah.
Barcarolle. And it was one of the last pieces that he would, regularly perform in public.
Okay.
And I think there is something forward-looking about it. I think like the Miroir, even for these composers, had they lived longer, had Chopin lived longer, where would he have gone with this language? Because there are some passages that are so, you don't really know where you are. Harmonically, it's a little bit lost.
Yeah.
But yet there's something so intimate. He's really pouring out something so personal in this piece.
Yeah.
And I think I respond to that image of, really desiring to hear what Chopin was thinking, what he was feeling, and how he would have played something like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's certainly, it's long been one of my favorite pieces. I've never had the nerve to learn it, and probably never will, but it makes it all the more pleasurable to hear somebody play it who's spent half their life with the piece. And then we get an encore. Of course, there's not the thunderous applause and standing ovation between the Chopin and the encore, but tell us what you decided to play for an encore.
Yeah, well, instead of the thunderous applause, we had some, banging outside and people taking out the garbage and things like that. We had some, but no, I decided, because I'm on this big Mendelssohn kick in my life. I'm really exploring. The pandemic really opened up my eyes to getting to know his piano music, and I'm trying to learn a bunch of it. And so I'll play his very famous spinning song from his Songs Without Words.
Right.
And it's a piece that I love, and it's really fun. And I thought it would be a nice little sort of bonbon to end the program.
Nice. Well, and between sessions yesterday, we spent a little time talking about sort of the role of the piano recital in modern life. I'm old enough to remember the days when every major city had a piano recital series, and there were great giants of the piano that came. Horowitz, Serkin, Rubinstein would play recitals in major cities, if not every year, then at least pretty often. You grew up in New York, and of course that was omnipresent here. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and it was nearly so. And now here we are in 2022, and the piano recital is still a thing. There are still people who do it beautifully, and who are positioned as you are to keep doing it for the next several decades. What's different now in your mind about a piano recital than perhaps it was a few decades ago?
It seems to me that this idea of creating interesting programs, creating programs of, yes, pieces from the standard literature as we know it, as we've studied it from childhood, but also then finding a way to put your own spin on telling a story with a recital program. I think that there's a through line that needs to be embraced right now. At least when I put together programs, I start if I respond particularly personally to the music. That has to be
right.
A given. It can't function.
It has to be true to you.
It has to be true to me. And I'm also a composer, and I love to put my own music on concert programs and to write pieces that maybe relate to pieces I'm working on. And I've done that with countless examples. But I think that it's important to listen to what's truthful to the individual performer, to present that. And that takes a lot of time to really learn what that is, to really get inside yourself and your soul.
And when you say it takes time, it takes years.
Yeah. So I don't think it really even matters what the repertoire is that is being presented, as long as it's done in a thoughtful and truthful way. I think that's what audiences can respond to, the kind of human element that they can see, the vulnerability, they can see the time, they can see the labor, they can see the success and the failures that's gone into the preparation, because it's so cool, because I've been playing this Chopin Barcarolle for 17 years, half my life, and it continues to evolve with me. It continues to it's not like, okay, I know this Chopin barcarolle, let's go. It's like I'm continually, it's like a friend. It's like we argue, we're challenged by this. It's like a person living.
Well, it's funny. One of the things that occurred to me, I can't remember how many years ago, that and I don't even remember the piece I was thinking about in terms of just my own playing, that I had played it so much and lived with it so much that I probably have spent more time with the piece than the composer did. And I'm sure that's the case for you with the barcarolle.
Yeah.
I mean, he wrote the piece toward the end of his life. It was his brainchild, and he played it some, but he didn't live 17 years after he played the piece.
That's a good point. I actually never thought about that. That is really an interesting thing to think about. Yeah, and as a composer, you often write something, maybe you revise it, maybe you don't, and you move on to the next thing.
Right.
So, but it's true. But he is telling us a lot in the barcarolle. There's a lot in it, a lot of layers, and it feels like a real outpouring from a man who was sick and getting more and more frail and disillusioned with life and the state of the world in Europe in the 1840s, and it feels like a real personal journey, that piece.
Yeah. Well, Michael, thanks for having me here.
Thank you for coming, Steve, all this way.
It's fun. I actually, if you want to know how this whole thing worked, this is a one-bedroom apartment, and I had my camping gear and hung out on the floor in his living room. So, and we're crawling under the piano and setting up all the cables and mics and lights, and
it's been an amazing day.
This is kind of a fun adventure, and if you're seeing this a few days before the webcast, please tune in for the webcast of the concert. And if you're seeing this as a part of the countdown clock, hang on to your hat, because it's going to be a marvelous concert. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Steve.
All right.